Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our first Building Bridges Community of Practice Lunch and Learn session. My name is Yan Chen. I'm the Community Coordinator. This will become one of our regular community events, and we look forward to bringing you more in the future. If you'd like to receive updates on upcoming events and the registration links, please join the community. You can scan the QR code, which is in the background of my video. You should see the QR code here, or I'm dropping the link to the chat right now. Now I would like to begin our time together by acknowledging and respecting the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on whose traditional territories CU's work conducted across Canada. We strive for respectful relationships with all Indigenous peoples as we search for collective healing, true reconciliation, and honoring these beautiful lands and seas together. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to highlight. So after Alexandra's presentation, we will have a Q&A session. If you'd like to ask questions verbally, you can raise your hand by clicking the button. There's a button showing a hand like this, so click it, and I'll enable speaking on my end. Then you can turn on your audio microphone to ask the questions verbally, but your video won't show up, so only your voice. And you're also welcome to submit your questions at any time during the presentation or the Q&A in the Q&A box. It's different from the regular chat box we're using right now. It should be at the bottom bar. If you can't find it right now, it might be hidden under the three dots menu. So there's a three dots menu, say more. Click that, and then you probably will find a Q&A button, and click that, then it will help to bring it up for you. If none of these options works for you, probably you haven't updated to the latest version of Zoom. So you can also drop your question in the regular chat, and I'll be monitoring it and make sure all the questions will be answered. Then feel free to chat with other attendees in the chat box, or if you run into any issues, please let me know. I'll try to help as much as I can. And please note this session will be recorded, and we will share the recording on our YouTube channel and on our community platform as a public resource. We will make sure all the attendees' names will be blurred before sharing. Now, let's welcome Alexandra. Alexandra is an AI operations specialist at AI First Consulting. She has a strong background in helping teams adopt new technologies in ways that truly last. Her expertise spans systems design, visual communication, process optimization, and problem solving. Today, she'll be sharing Working Smarter for the Ocean, AI tools every nonprofit should know. And now I'm pleased to turn the microphone over to Alexandra.
Thanks so much, Yan. It's lovely to be here. I'm just going to share my screen now and we will get started. So like Yan mentioned, my name is Alexandra Theroux. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the AI operations specialist at AI First Consulting. We are a small kind of startup consulting firm focused on supporting businesses across Atlantic Canada to adopt AI into their practices with intentionality, focused on helping them figure out how to make AI work for them and unlock their human potential across the teams. So today I'm excited to be talking to you folks a little bit about AI, how it can be applied to your work in the ocean sector, and some of the tools that you folks should know or should be aware of. We are going to be just kind of doing a brief intro into what is generative AI, so what it can and can't do. I'm going to touch briefly on how to use AI safely and responsibly. And then we'll jump right into specific use cases and examples of how it can be used in your sector. I'll talk a little bit as well about some skills or sorry tools that I will overview, some kind of free opportunities or options that you can test out. Um, Today, I do have some demos that I'd like to chat about as well, or just kind of highlight, depending on time. And I've got a bit of a roadmap to help get you started if you're not already using AI. And then, like Ian mentioned, we do hope to have some time for questions. So if you have any, feel free to pop them in the chat or the Q&A throughout, and we'll address them at the end. So this is a quote that our founder, Robert Newcomb, really likes to kind of highlight, and it really speaks to the kind of moment that we're in with AI. So Seth Godin, who is an author, was speaking in on the Tim Ferriss show about AI and likening it to electricity for our century. So back in the 1800s, companies were saying, we're not going to be an electricity company. And they were kind of afraid to adopt AI. It was a brand new thing. They didn't know how it was going to impact their work, and they wanted to keep the status quo. Now all of those companies are gone. So you don't need to become an AI company. You just need to figure out how to use AI kind of like electricity. So electricity is something that is now an infrastructure. It's something that is embedded in the ways that we all work and live and kind of navigate the world. And AI is now becoming one of those tools for business and other kind of opportunities. So the question isn't necessarily should we use AI, it's where do we start and how do we use it effectively? Um, so every major technology shift changed how organizations and people work. So like we mentioned, electricity changed a lot of the kind of innovations. So there weren't as many there wasn't as much demand for coal or people kind of managing furnaces, et cetera. Now we've got electricity, we've got electricians, new industry, et cetera. Flight changed the kind of shipping and rail and ocean travel industry. Cryptography changed how we kind of navigate computers and different systems. Then computers came into play. They became more kind of widespread, and then the internet happened, which we all know has changed society widely. Generative AI is kind of that next wave. It is already here, obviously. We're all talking about it. We're all seeing it. Most people have it embedded in their day-to-day. And organizations now have to adapt. And those that have adapted early have an advantage over ones that have not. So briefly, let's talk a little bit about what AI is. And when I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about generative AI, which is essentially AI that creates something new from a prompt or from a kind of direction that you provide it. So these are typically called LLMs, or they're rooted in LLMs, which are large language models. And those are essentially next word predictor machines. So think really, really hyper souped up autofill like you have on your phone. So um, LLMs are kind of based mainly in pre-training and post-training. So the first pre-training info or input is your prompt. So let's say my prompt is I want an LLM to help me be more productive. So I type that into ChatGPT or whatever functionality I want to use. Next, I maybe want to add some uploads. So maybe I have a specific project plan, or I've got an example of how I work, or some key areas that I want to be more productive, or even some articles that I think are interesting that when I think about being more productive, I want to emulate what these articles are saying. So I can upload those as well. Additionally, within my own platform, I can add custom instructions. So in my own account for ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, etc., I can go into my user account and add specific custom instructions. You can also expand on your prompt to do that as well. So I can tell it to be really nice to me. I can tell it to be pretty critical. I can tell it to respond with bullet points or keep things as succinct as possible or keep it friendly and fun, etc. So those are some common custom instructions that you can use. The sky's the limit there. Finally, the last kind of area of pre-training is memory. So if you're using an account that you actually have access to, that you've been adding more content into or have multiple chats in, that's expanding or creating a memory for your large language model or your generative AI. Additionally, if your chat is longer, there is a memory or a short-term memory from that chat itself. So that is another area of pre-training. Post-training is all of the feedback that you provide to the large language model. So when you say, yep, that's a great response, if you give it the thumbs up or thumbs down, which you typically can see in response to any kind of output that most generative AIs provide. Additionally, there are post-training, like that is what a lot of the people at data centers and working in the industry are actually doing. They are reviewing the content. They're verifying whether or not it's good responses or bad responses, et cetera. So there's a lot of post-training and people involved in these aspects of creating this final output or helping AI create these outputs. So from all of that information, prompted by help me be more productive, AI is then going to pick the next word or use a token. And what it's going to do is it's basing that entirely on probabilities. So based on everything that it knows from all of this information, it's going to say, okay, what is the probability or the best probability for the best next word? So right now in this example, the has a 60% probability for the best next word. So it's going to use the as the next word and so on. It does that for every single word in your chat. So when you see AI kind of respond really quickly, just know that that's what's happening for literally every line of text in a generative AI conversation. Obviously, AI is not human. It isn't perfect. It's evolving constantly. And there are some right now, common quirks that we're seeing across pretty much every LLM to varying degrees of intensity. Some common issues are memory challenges. So sometimes a generative LM or generative AI will not actually remember conversations, whether that's between two different chats, whether it's within the chat itself, etc. So sometimes you'll be like, no, I just told you not to do that, or don't you remember this conversation, etc., which is quite frustrating, obviously, when you're trying to rely on that memory. Additionally, there's something called jagged intelligence. So it can write a research summary, but it stumble on how many R's in strawberry. Not sure if folks have seen that example kind of running around online. Additionally, there was another one that was going around where people were prompting their generative AI to say, okay, I need to wash my car. It is 100, the car wash is 100 meters away. Should I drive or should I walk? And AI is telling people to walk, even though obviously you need to take your car to a car wash in order to wash it. So that's an example of that jagged intelligence in effect. Thirdly, hallucinations. Now, this is a huge one. Obviously, it creates the most concerns and it is often the most talked about issue or quirk that AI comes up with. And it's where AI will confidently give you the wrong information. So it's AI is built to make you happy. It's built to keep you engaged. So it will do that based on like it will continue to do that by providing those kind of next word tokens and answering your questions or prompts with outputs, regardless of whether or not it's true facts, with the goal of keeping you engaged in the conversation. So the way to respond to hallucinations is always verify any fact or information or direction that AI is giving you to make sure that you're not kind of falling prey to some of these hallucinations. Speaking of that eager to please, AI can often be very sycophantic. So it will yes and you, it will pipe you up, it will kind of tell you that you're wonderful or every idea is great, and it won't necessarily push back. So this is something that you can try to combat within your custom instructions. So you can tell AI to not agree with you unless you have proven yourself, so you can kind of push it to push you back, but it is still a common issue and something that you should be aware of while you're engaging with AI. So we've talked a little bit about how AI works and some of the quirks that it has. But where it really shines in the ocean sector and in nonprofits and really across the board is in these kind of six areas here. So research synthesis and literature review. If you've got a giant 50-page report or multiple reports or multiple pieces of data and analysis that you need to analyze and highlight for key themes, or you want to try to identify commonalities, etc., AI is really great at doing this. So there are tools like Google Notebook LM or ChatGPT even, or Gemini's Deep Research, etc., where you can upload this information. You can ask it to do some external research to augment what you're reviewing, or also you can just say, review this and ask it questions and kind of have it work with you. Um, Similarly to the quirks, and I will reiterate this throughout this entire presentation, always verify what it's telling you, always research, always double check its work. So this is a great place to start, but I wouldn't recommend kind of repeating anything that it's saying without double checking. Additionally, species and habitat identification. So there's a lot of image-based AI tools, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, where you can identify specific species based on a photo. So there are a bunch of tools like that for plants, but there's also some out there for animal life and aquatic and ocean species out there. Additionally, environmental data analysis and reporting is another piece. So research, data analysis, AI is really, really good at taking a lot of information and synthesizing it, putting it into reports, and responding or helping you highlight key themes. Obviously, with nonprofits, grant writing and finding funding, sourcing funding, as well as communicating with your funders is really critical. So AI is really great at developing or responding to those grant writing applications. So it can take the required or writing guides or grant recommendations for a specific tool or fund that you're hoping to apply for, and it will take the information that you provided about your company, your project, your goals, etc., and help you write a really effective application that will hopefully stand out and make you more likely to receive that funding. Additionally, once you receive your funding, most funders require a lot of reporting, depending on who you are funded by, around like the success and progress of what their money is funding, of how your project is doing, since they're obviously invested in that. So AI is really great at helping you provide that communication or draft that communication to keep people informed and to help include that data-based communication, which is not necessarily super easy to write on the regular, can often be quite dry to share with folks. So using AI as a way to help you do that often tedious and administrative heavy work is really, really helpful. Speaking of writing, it's great at stakeholder and public engagement. So you can help it with automating emails. You can help it with drafting communications campaigns. So whether that's a PR post, a interview guide, or speaking notes for a presentation, or even prep notes for a conversation with a potential funder or partner, or social media posts, etc. It's really great at helping you with that public engagement and stakeholder engagement in helping get awareness out for whatever you're trying to achieve. Finally, it's wonderful at field documentation and standard operating procedures. So if you're trying to create common practices or document common practices, AI is a great way to help you ensure that that information is tracked and recorded in a way that is effective and easy for other people to access and understand. You can do that through so many different ways. You can write it out. You can find tools like Whale or Scribe to screen record specific processes that you're doing, or you can even just talk to an AI tool and have it synthesize that into a specific kind of document following a common template, depending on what you're looking for. With all of those potential use cases in mind, obviously these tools are really powerful, but the guardrails or the ways that we protect ourselves with those tools is really just as important. So free AI tools in particular are not zero risk, and how you use those really matters. So if you are using an AI tool, especially a free one, for your organization or through your work, you definitely need to start with a policy, an organizational AI use policy. This helps protect you as an organization, as well as your employees, in providing guidance and recommendations and an understanding of how your company wants to use AI, your position around specific tools, specific use cases, and how to experiment with new AI tools as they grow. It also helps to highlight key confidentiality or policy, like external policy or restrictions that are out there that your employees or even stakeholders or partners may not be aware of. So starting with an organizational policy for work-related AI use is critical, and I highly recommend doing that before you even talk about how you want to work with AI in your team. That should be how you start and how you document that conversation. Secondly, like I mentioned, I'm going to repeat this a lot today. Always apply a human review to any AI generated output before you use it. Make that a part of your practice. Make it so that when you use your prompt, you look at the output, you're always double checking that work before you put it into, say, an email, a report, you copy it into another Word document, etc. You can use AI to help you with this review. So one thing that I like to do is I will maybe ask a tool like Claude to develop a simple report based on some external research. And then I can take that report, I can export it and put it into Gemini and say, hey, I've been given this report, and I can either tell it that it's from another AI tool, or I can tell it that maybe it was given to me by a colleague and I want them to critique it. So there's interesting ways that you can kind of use these tools to work with each other or to work with you. But the best way always is to make sure that you're always doing that double, triple checking, especially if it is citing specific resources. Speaking of those hallucinations, I did have an example where I actually asked an AI to provide me with sources, with URLs specific to a certain website for an output that I was asking for, and it generated completely false URLs. These URLs and titles did not exist. So always double check because it will tell you very confidently what you've asked it to tell you. Finally, with AI tools, the number one critical thing that I will always mention, regardless of whether or not you've got an organizational policy in place, whether you do have a common practice of applying human review into the outputs, never, ever, ever input personal, confidential, or client data into a free AI tool. Treat those tools like a public forum on the internet. You have no way of managing how that data is used, how it's stored, where it goes. So ensuring that you are protecting your confidential personal and client data is a critical first step before you start experimenting. So if you're trying to do something with specific data, make sure that it's anonymized. Make sure that you're even talking about it in broad strokes if you're just looking for some analysis or um, ex experimentation or brainstorming on that. So now that we've talked a little bit about what AI can do, how it works, and how to use it responsibly, let's dig into some specifics for your sector. I'd like to start first with some of those free tools that I mentioned. So I've already talked a little bit about ChatGPT and Gemini, as well as Claude. So these are tools that are great for general purpose AI. So they are wonderful if you're just trying to get into AI. I think most people start with ChatGPT. I personally prefer Claude. I find its interface a lot more engaging for me, but there's lots of tools out there. So they're excellent for helping you with writing, analysis, planning, and there are lots of free tiers available. Again, make sure that you refer to that for the responsible use policy or your recommendations. Don't ever put anything private in those free tools. Additionally, if your organization has Microsoft 365, you might also or already have Microsoft Copilot available to you. There are different tiers for Microsoft Copilot as well. So you might not have a full license, but you might have like Copilot chat as an example. So I recommend before you start experimenting with Copilot in your organization, regardless of whether or not you've got it, you maybe reach out to your AI team or IT team if you've got one, or check in to see if you've got any policies or any information around what tier you're actually on so that you can understand what's safe to share in Copilot and what isn't. The paid versions of Copilot are just as secure as your SharePoint. So if you've got a 365, you use Outlook as your email, and you have SharePoint, and maybe you purchase a Copilot premium account or license for your company, that is just as secure as your Outlook server, as your Exchange server. So there is a lot more that you can do with a tool like Copilot that can utilize your more confidential or private and intellectual property documentation. So you can expand on that a little bit more. Additional tools that are really useful for AI or for AI kind of management within your organization that do have some free options are tools like Otter AI or Fireflies AI. These are meeting transcription and summarization tools. They're great for field notes and interviews. So most of these types of apps, so these are two that I personally use, but there are tons out there if you just search AI note taker or AI transcription. But a lot of these have apps that you can use on your phone, so you can actually just speak out loud as if you're talking to another person, or if you're fond of voice notes, you can just use your AI note taker as your voice note, and that would give you a written record that you can also engage with as far as like, oh, can you tell me where I talked about this, or can you summarize this piece of that conversation, or highlight anything that was maybe common across that whole meeting or conversation. So definitely don't sleep on these note takers, especially if you're a organization or your work relies a lot on meeting with folks. Jumping into some of the more image generation or image-based tools, there are tools like iNaturalist. So that's an AI-assisted species identification from photos. So it's largely a community data set. But if you download that app, you can take a photo or grab a photo online of something that you're trying to identify. And if others from the community have added information in, then you will be able to use that to help you identify that species or that part of the ecosystem that you're looking at. Google Lens is very similar. It's an image-based identification. It's accessible via your smartphone. I know I've definitely used it for plants personally, but it's very similar to iNaturalist, just not as focused in on species identification. And then finally, there's GBIF, which is a Global Biodiversity Information Facility. It's open biodiversity data, so it's increasingly AI integrated. It's not actually an AI tool itself, but it has more AI capabilities being added to it as it expands. So definitely recommend checking that out as far as accessing any kind of biodiverse information or species information, et cetera, if you're looking for that kind of support in your work. So within these tools, what are some ways that you can start using AI, or what are some ways that you can start experimenting? One of the ways that we at AI First like to recommend that people start is by following this acronym called drudgery. So it's basically if it's drudgery or if it's something that you don't necessarily like doing or you find it very tedious or challenging, start with something in this acronym. So the first D is drafting. So if you're trying to write anything from scratch, whether it's a blog post, a email, a quick chat message to a colleague, try drafting it through an AI tool and see how you feel about the response. I know personally the first way that I started using ChatGPT was to help me in synthesizing my thoughts into a concise response or email communication to a colleague. I'm often quite verbose when I'm thinking out loud, and those emails are often quite challenging or a bit of a slog to read. I'm one of those people who, before AI, definitely used the TLDR, too long, don't read, summary at the end of emails so that people didn't necessarily have to read through my entire thought process. Using AI to write that whole thought process the way that I wanted to, and then helping me get better at making it more concise both helped improve my own writing, but also improve my communication by making my communication more direct and helping me understand how to kind of cut that extra noise from certain communications. The next letter in the acronym is reading, so understanding long or complex text. So, like we mentioned earlier, if you've got a long research report or multiple reports or sources of information, AI can definitely help you with reading through that and understanding that longer text. It can't help you understand it, but it can help in that it can't understand it itself, but it can help you highlight key areas, or you can ask questions and it can kind of do that research and comprehension or support that comprehension for you. Next is upcycling, so reworking content into new formats. So if you've got a long research report and you want to be able to communicate that across multiple avenues. So maybe you want to create a video on YouTube or social media. You want to create multiple social media posts. You want to create some email campaigns to highlight key aspects. And maybe you want to develop a presentation. AI can really help you take that one piece of information or content and turn it into multiple different formats, depending on what you're trying to do or how you're trying to customize it. Speaking of that kind of reformatting, designing is another great way that you can try using AI. So creating images, visuals, and even planning out presentations. So before I created this presentation, I actually used AI to help me with the outline and help me understand, okay, if this is the flow, like what's the best flow? What's the best kind of content to help achieve the message that I want to achieve in this webinar? Next, we've got gathering. So if you're collecting information from multiple sources, you can use AI to be your first kind of research assistant. So treat it, if you rely on that deep research tool or a research tool, most of the free AI tools have that. It's great at gathering a lot of external data. You can help guide it by giving it parameters around like, okay, I want specific information for this sector. I don't want you to go outside of this area. So Atlantic Canada as an example. And I want you to only go back or find information from 2020 to 2026, et cetera. So it's a great tool for gathering information to help you compare and expand your research. Next, we've got evaluating, so reviewing the quality and analyzing data. So if you've got a huge data set, if you've got multiple data sets and you want to actually try and understand or evaluate what you've been kind of reporting or collecting that information on, AI is great at helping you identify patterns and analyze whether or not the data is quality or if you've got some errors within your data set. Next, we've got routines. So if you've got some recurring tasks that are often quite time intensive, so maybe you have common emails or reminders that you have to share, whether it's within your team or even for yourself, AI can really help you with some of those routine tasks by creating automations, by supporting you with maybe thinking that through a little bit more, or actually building out agents that will do the work for you so that you can focus on other things. Finally, the last letter in the acronym is yearning. So if you want to explore ideas or questions or new skills, definitely give AI a go. So I often use AI as a collaboration partner. So if I've got an idea that I want to explore, I'll treat AI like it's a colleague or like it's a partner or even just a friend. And I'm like, hey, I have this idea. You are this person. You've got this type of expertise. Let's talk it through together. Obviously, this does not replace human interaction, and I don't recommend doing that. But as someone who works remotely and who's often not able to have in-person engagement on everything that I would like to do, it's a great starting place to kind of explore new ideas, maybe refine an idea, or even test whether or not it's a good one, or if you've just kind of gone off the rails. So definitely recommend giving drudgery a try if you're looking for new ways to understand or figure out where to start with AI. So like most new things, the technology itself isn't hard, it's changing that's hard. So right now, AI is the round wheels, and our current approaches across most businesses are the square ones. So most people and our most common problem at AI First that we hear from companies around why they're not adopting AI or why they haven't already or why they haven't even started to even look into it is that they're too busy. They're not interested in or they're overwhelmed by the possibilities and they're not sure where to start. So definitely recommend trying to just carve out even 5 minutes a day or 5 minutes a week to give it a try and find ways to push yourself out of your comfort zone of your current approach to test out those round wheels to see if you can identify some quick wins that will help you move that forward. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I am going to do just a brief example of how you can use AI, specifically a free AI tool to do just some simple operations work. So I'm going to zoom out of this right now, and I'm going to jump into the free version of ChatGPT, and I'm going to use this prompt. So as I am typing this in, I'll read it out loud to you folks. So the prompt right now is, I manage a small team doing marine field surveys. Can you help me create a simple pre-departure checklist for our field crews covering safety, equipment, and data collection readiness? So that's the prompt. You'll notice I'm not logged into ChatGPT. This is just chatgpt.com. It's a free version. I've not told this tool anything about myself or my team, just manage a small team. We're doing surveys. Help me with this option. So I've given it no private or proprietary information, and let's see what it comes back with. So within this, because I kept the prompt quite high level, I AI has now created a template based on what it thinks would be helpful given the information that I gave it, as well as that pre and post training data. So you see here we've got that checklist. It's already identified that I might want to capture the project, the date, who's doing it, who's the lead, and then it's broken it down into those kind of three areas of safety, readiness, the vessel readiness, as well as the communications, final no-go, etc. So there's some notes here and more. And you'll notice here it is reminding me that I'm not using a paid version, so to be careful about what I am adding to it. So what I would recommend from here, if you were going to use this or going to try to take it and turn it into something that your company wants to use or that you want to try, is ask it follow-up questions. So maybe prompt it to use a slightly different template if you've already got a version of this, or say, can you explain to me why you came up with these specific checklists for the final go, no go, or things like that. And then from there, you can export the template and then start trialing it. And then you can even evaluate whether or not it's been effective through AI. So jumping back here, I'm going to skip this just because I'm aware of where we're at for time. So as far as how AI can be used really effectively and some ways to really start using AI in your sector in particular, but especially in nonprofits, is really in these three key areas. So helping you identify and apply for smarter grants. So inputting raw scientific metrics, asking the AI to draft clear, compelling, and jargon-free funding proposals that are tailored to your community foundations. This will help you, hopefully, secure more funding and more relevant and aligned funding, which will help you further your mission. Additionally, AI can be used to help you make awareness more um, easier for you to expand, easier for you to communicate across multiple different platforms and to get your message out, which is often the biggest problem with most nonprofits or most kind of community-based work. And then finally, definitely relying on AI to support with policy synthesis. So leaning into AI's ability to really go through those really intense and large documentation, all of that information, help you identify areas of policy within your organization, but also maybe there are government policies or legislation that's coming through that would impact or could impact your work, using AI to help you synthesize that and turn it into communication that you can then use to apply for better funding or to gain public support or find stakeholders that will help you move things forward. These are some key areas that I definitely recommend kind of adding into your strategy if you're thinking about using AI within your work as an organization. And I'm going to skip through here. I'm also very happy to share these slides with the organizers afterward if anybody wants to see some of the stuff that I've skipped ahead for time here. So we've talked a little bit about the pre and post training, and prompting was the first thing that came up. So prompting is that process of giving an AI system a text input or the prompt to generate a response. There are probably a lot of other tools or terminologies that you might have heard about AI and prompting. So something called prompt engineering, as well as context engineering. So prompt engineering is turn-by-turn instructions. So it's really creating more robust and more specific and direct instructions within your prompt. So making it a much more involved prompt to help really guide effective and specific outputs from your AI. Context engineering on the other side is providing that background info to help get that desired income, to help you get that rationale. If you combine the two together, so you start using prompt engineering and context engineering, that will help you kind of achieve prompt mastery, as we call it at AI First. One of the ways that we recommend that you kind of start with that prompt engineering is through an acronym that we call co-creator. So we recommend essentially treating your generative AI like a co-creator. So you don't have to use all 9 of these recommendations or directions to create every prompt, but if you do, you'll be very interested to see what comes out of it. So the first part of that is a character. So give your AI or your generative AI a role. So like I said in one of my examples, I often will tell AI, you are an HR generalist who has over 20 years of experience in Nova Scotia working on policy within, say, the healthcare sector, if that's a company that I'm trying to work with. So give it a role. And then next, give it an objective. So tell it what you want it to do. Tell it what you're trying to achieve. Next, you're going to give it context. So that's where the context engineering comes into play. So you're going to give it as much information as it needs, whether that's examples, whether it's background info, whether it's documentation, etc. Tell it as much as you can about who you are, what the problem is, and why you want its help to achieve that objective. Next is reasoning. So you're gonna ask it to tell it your reasoning, but or tell it its reasoning as it's kind of creating the output so that you can understand its rationale. But also, why does this matter? So you explain your reasoning for this. Why are you asking for this? What are you hoping to achieve? Again, adding examples. So showing it what goods looks like. So if you've got in our prompt or our kind of demo example, there was a template for that checklist. If I had a version of a checklist that I really liked, whether it was one of my own from a past project, or it was one that I saw online, I could upload that example and say, follow this kind of template. I want the output to look like this or to follow a similar format. Additions. So if you've got any extras to include, sometimes this can be some kind of pressure that you want to add to it. So if you tell the AI or the chat that maybe this output is really critical to your job, or it's very important that this output be as well thought out as possible because it's going to someone who is going to make decisions about funding, etc. That is one way to kind of add those additions to it. Next, you can add a template. So like I mentioned, there's an example of the template. You can, or just write it out. So maybe I want my checklist to include a purpose. I want it to include a space to record the project. I want it to include the actual functionality to check things off on the list. I want it to maybe include some columns where it says it can have people initial an item when they complete it or write the date when they complete it, etc. So really helping the AI understand that desired format or structure. Second to last, we've got orient. So you want to tell it what kind of tone you want it to use, who's the audience, how long should it be. So what are what is the output and who is it for? So how can the AI orient itself into what would be the best kind of response? And then finally, adding restrictions. So what you want it to avoid. So I know AI is often under fire for using M dashes. I personally use M dashes a lot in my own work, but maybe you want it to avoid those so that people don't flag it automatically as AI. Maybe you want it to avoid jargon because you're trying to give this to someone who maybe doesn't understand your context or who doesn't work in your sector and won't understand the jargon, which will then alienate them to the message or the output. So adding those restrictions is just as critical as all of the other pieces there. So if you do all of that, or you try even some combination of these things, that will help you kind of achieve that prompt mastery, especially if you focus on really leaning into this context aspect when you're creating new prompts and trying to get outputs from a generative AI tool. So before we go, or before I kind of hand it over to you folks for questions, I wanted to recommend a bit of a three-step action plan for getting started with AI. So my first recommendation would be to start this week by opening up ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or whichever your preferred kind of free AI tool is, and try one prompt. So I'll send this slide deck to the organizers. You're welcome to try the prompts that I've got in this example, or just try one for yourself. Maybe it was a task that you were already given, that you've already completed, which is honestly a great way to test the effectiveness of AI. If you start with things that you know that you're good at, then you're more able to evaluate whether or not the output is good. Next, pick one task from your drudgery list and let AI do the first draft. So whether that's design or evaluate, etc. Finally, try that iNaturalist app if species identification is something that's relevant to your work, or Google Lens, or the GBIF tool. Next week, I'd like you to start using AI every time you sit down to write something. So before you write it in your email, before you write it into social media directly, start with AI first. Just see what happens. So try it for a grant narrative or board report. Share a prompt that worked well with a colleague. So a lot of the ways that we at AI First kind of expand our own practices and understanding of AI is by communicating with each other about what worked, what didn't, and what we're finding to be interesting and relevant to our own work. Finally, when you're ready, explore Microsoft Copilot if your organization uses it. Connect with local digital capacity programs, so like Digital Nova Scotia or Tech Impact Canada. Those can support you by providing you with additional learning or training or resources, whether that's through funding to help secure custom training for your company, or through just free online tools or some paid tools. Then finally, consider a simple internal AI use policy if this is something that you and your organization is interested in adopting across the board. So I recommend with any AI experimentation that you approach it in this kind of way of firing bullets and then cannonballs. So first you fire bullets, as my CEO likes to highlight. So those are low cost, low risk, and low distraction experiments. So they're not going to cost any money if they don't go well. They're not going to impact your work or the work of your team. And they're not necessarily going to distract you from what you're really trying to do. So quick, etc. So use these bullets as examples to help you figure out what will work and calibrate the line of sight by taking those small shots. So the more small examples or the more small experiments that you try, the more effectively you will understand where you want to focus in on how AI can support your work or your work as a team. Once you have that validation, you can fire a cannonball. So throw some concentrated resources in on a big bet on that calibrated line of sight. So when you know what you want to try, go all in on something or try something a little bit bigger to really test the functionality and whether or not it will be effective for you as a team. Finally, with any AI and any new tool, really, I recommend that you try to be curious and not judgmental. So if anybody is a fan of Ted Lasso, we really are here at AI First. That scene with Ted and Rupert, apologies, my dog just decided to make noise, um, where he reminds folks to be curious about who they're talking to. Definitely approach AI with that curiosity and not necessarily with judgment, but use your own judgment when you're trying to explore or decide how to experiment with AI. I'm gonna throw my contact info on the screen for now, but I know I've eaten up a lot of the question time now, so I just wanted to hand it over to folks for questions if there are any.
So thank you so much, Alexandra. This is really an insightful talk, and I've learned a lot myself. So maybe I will start with my question. So we've been noticed like AI tools have like are changing so quickly. So I always feel a little bit anxious about like how to keep myself up to date with all the new tools, the new features, what would be the best practices. Do you have any like suggestions, advice for that? I think the things you mentioned about we can spend like 5 minutes every day to explore, that's really great. Besides that, do you have any other advice for me?
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Definitely the fast pace of innovation and change for AI can absolutely be incredibly overwhelming. I will acknowledge I am the least AI advanced within my team. The speed with which some of my team members kind of stay on top of and keep track of all of the different ways that AI is expanding and growing and innovating is often quite mind-boggling. But the ways that I try to focus in on on what I want to know or to kind of filter through some of that noise is by starting with what I know. So leaning into those kind of quick wins, those drudgery tasks or those experiments. So going back to the fire bullets and cannonballs aspect. So I've really started to hone in on how I want to use AI to help my work. And instead of focusing on all of the different features of what's possible, I focus in on how to use one tool or some tools really effectively to do the specific things that I want to do. And then when I've got time, if that ever happens, I then take some time to then explore, okay, so this is a cool new feature that's out there that maybe could open up a new experiment or a new area that I want to expand my AI use into, but I'll take that as a 5 minute test. I'll do that small experiment. Otherwise, I really focus in most of my efforts and energy in getting really good at one tool and trying to just continue to use it and test its limits. So Claude is a great example for me. I use Claude pretty much daily. I have it open all the time, and I try new ways of using it, but I also repeat ways of using it and just try to refine the outputs that I get from it in that way.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll open the floor to other attendees. And if you have any questions you want to ask verbally, please raise your hand and I can allow you to talk. And then you can turn on your audio microphone. We also have other questions showing up in the Q&A box. Alexandra, if you
Yeah,
mind, don't mind to start with these two questions.
yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the first one that I saw, which is where do I stand on the AI is good or AI is bad debate? And how can you use AI we use AI without relying on it too heavily? Honestly, that is such a great question. I love having conversations about the kind of moral aspects of AI, like is it good, is it bad? I largely um, am unfortunately neutral on AI. I believe AI itself is a tool. It is neither good or bad, in my opinion. It's how we are legislating it, it's how we're regulating it, it's how we're kind of putting guardrails in place and in how it's being both developed and how it's being used or misused. So I personally don't like to take a specific stance on AI as a whole, as it's good or bad, because I think any tool can be argued that it's good or bad. But I will say that there is a lot out there as far as how public policy and government and the developers of AI, like the businesses that are kind of managing the development and innovation of AI, that is inherently, in my mind, personally, bad. It's quite uh, irresponsible to both the environment, to the people, and to society as a whole in a lot of ways. So that's kind of how I approach, I guess, answering that conversation. I'd be happy to get into that a little bit more with anybody who's interested. I again will share my contact info if you want to kind of get into a really meaty debate. But to your second question, how can you use AI without relying on it too heavily? I think that I'll go back to my answer to Yan earlier, really getting clear on how you want to use it. And how you don't want to use it. So one thing that I like to recommend to people is before you start using AI, it's defining your own values and your barriers or boundaries around AI. So as an example, a personal example, I am a visual artist and I personally don't like the way that AI has been used. A lot of AI tools have been using visual art that is copyrighted and infringing upon that copyright to essentially exploit visual artists. So I personally do not use AI to generate images, but I will use AI to help me get recommendations for what to generate or for what stock images to use, etc. So I'm not using AI for design elements. I'm just not having it generate that directly. And that's a personal values-based decision. And that's how I kind of set a bit of a guardrail for myself. So my recommendation to kind of not relying on AI too heavily is getting really clear as an individual, but also as an organization, depending on how you're using it, on what you're comfortable with and what you definitely want to keep AI out of before you start kind of leaning into it. Um, The next question that I see there is what mechanisms should be put in place to prevent the risk of re-identification when AI models analyze and combine data that is considered non-personal when taken individually? Um, that is an excellent question. And I honestly don't think that I understand or that I know the answer. I don't think that I have a full understanding of how that re-identification could happen. Um, or really how the data, especially across free and individual platforms, is stored at that level. So um, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that, but I'd be happy to do some research and include that within my kind of slides when I share it with the organizers. Um,
Great. Thank you so much. I think we're almost there. So thank you very much, Alexandra, for your wonderful presentation, and thanks for everyone's participation. Just a quick reminder to stay connected to our upcoming community events. I've already dropped the links there. Now we have the AI clinic going on where you can ask questions. We have the experts from DFO and a PhD candidate at Dalhousie University here to answer your questions. We will also have an Ocean Vibe coding meetup event that everyone can get together and do programming. And we also have the next month's Lunch and Learn session ready for you to register. It's the topic is about building secure, cost-effective solutions with local AI. So, if you are not trusting these cloud-based AI tools, this session might be the right one for you to attend. And they're all free, and we'd love to see you there. So finally, I'd like to extend our thanks to our Building Bridges partners and our funders, Canada's Ocean Supercluster, and DFO and Meopar for their support in making this happen. And thank you again for Alexandra and everyone. And we will see you next time.